They used fake identities, hidden cameras, microphones inside face masks. Some paid over $300 for someone else to take their test. From Tokyo to Manchester, from AP exams in Singapore to TOEIC centers in Japan. This is the story of the biggest international cheating scandal in recent history. A scandal so massive, it led to more than 1,000 Chinese students being expelled, banned, and deported. But this isn't just about dishonesty in school. This is about how a generation has been taught that the result matters more than the truth, and what happens when that illusion finally collapses. In May 2024, a calm afternoon in Tokyo turned into the opening act of a national scandal when a young Chinese man was escorted out of the Nakano police station in handcuffs. His name was Wang Li Quinn, a graduate student at Kyoto University. But his academic pursuits weren't what had caught the attention of Japanese authorities. Wang had been arrested for using a false identity to sit for the TOEIC exam, one of Japan's most trusted English proficiency tests. The charges were serious, but they only scratched the surface. Inside Wang's surgical mask, police found a miniature wireless microphone, so small it could be mistaken for part of the fabric. It was connected to a live transmission device that allowed him to send real-time answers to other candidates. At first, it seemed like just another isolated case of exam fraud. But then, investigators noticed something odd. Over 40 examinees had registered with Wang's exact home address in Kyoto. These individuals didn't know each other personally, yet they had all somehow selected the same location during their TOEIC sign-ups. That was no coincidence. It was a deliberate strategy to be placed in the same exam room, creating a controlled environment where Wang, posing as a legitimate candidate, could broadcast answers to a pre-selected group of clients wearing concealed receivers. As investigators began to unravel the layers, they discovered that Wang had already attempted the same stunt in February in a different district of Tokyo. But in May, the operation had scaled up significantly. Police tracked the digital trail of messages and payments through Chinese language messaging apps, WeChat, QQ, and encrypted Telegram groups, and uncovered a thriving underground market where Wang sold TOEIC coaching services. Except his coaching wasn't academic. He offered full answer feeding packages for a flat fee, 50,000 yen or about $340, promising clients they could pass the exam without needing to speak English. On June 6th, less than a month after his first arrest, Wang was detained again, this time for impersonating a different candidate during a test in Shinjuku. Just one day later, at a TOEIC test center in Narima, Tokyo police raided the facility after noticing that 77 candidates, mostly Chinese nationals, had again listed the same registration address. 3 were caught with forbidden devices, including earpieces, pinhole cameras, and wearable transmission gear embedded in coat collars. Interviews revealed that these students were part of a growing cheating ring, with Wang acting as both organizer and lead operator. But Wang was no criminal mastermind. He was, in many ways, a product of demand. TOEIC scores carry immense weight in Japan, not just for graduation, but for immigration, employment, and visa extensions. Failing the TOEIC could mean a student loses eligibility for job offers or faces visa delays. For foreign students, many of whom face intense academic and financial pressure, the consequences of failure are devastating. That desperation created the perfect market for someone like Wang to step in. In response to the unfolding scandal, the International Business Communication Corporation, IBCC, launched a sweeping internal investigation. They used registration data, IP logs, and seating arrangements to identify suspicious clusters. The results were damning. Over the past 24 months, more than 800 TOEIC test takers were found to be linked to the same cheating network. All of them were banned from taking TOEIC for 5 years, and their test scores were retroactively invalidated. IBCC issued a public statement, vowing to overhaul their exam protocols, promising better ID verification, randomized seating assignments, and stricter supervision in high-risk areas. The media coverage in Japan was fierce. Headlines didn't mince words. TOEIC fraud tarnishes Japan's academic integrity. Cheating imported, China's test ring in Tokyo. Public sentiment turned sharply. Japanese citizens expressed anger not only at the cheaters, but at the institutions that had failed to detect the fraud earlier. Online forums buzzed with xenophobic remarks, and soon even honest Chinese students found themselves under suspicion. Some were randomly questioned. Others were warned by professors or employers that their credentials might not be accepted without re-verification. For a generation that had studied diligently, this stigma was a silent punishment for someone else's crime. What disturbed authorities the most wasn't the cheating itself, it was the industrial scale of the operation. Wang had effectively turned test fraud into a logistical business. By exploiting Japan's predictable seating algorithm, he ensured groups of his clients would be placed near him in the exam hall. He managed registrations, created fake IDs, and even gave instructions on how to act nervous, but not too nervous, to avoid drawing suspicion. The network used rotating addresses, burner phones, and even fake student IDs borrowed from recent graduates who had left the country. This was not a careless attempt by desperate students. It was a calculated, repeatable system. And the scariest part? Wang wasn't the only one doing it. Authorities hinted at the possibility that Wang was just one node in a much larger web, potentially tied to transnational fraud rings operating in Seoul, Taipei, and even Vancouver. The Tokyo operation, for all its sophistication, might have just been the Japanese branch of a multinational cheating franchise. And if that was true, then banning 800 students and arresting one mastermind wouldn't be enough. Because while Japan scrambled to restore public trust, another scandal was already brewing in Singapore. But this one didn't involve fake IDs or earpieces. It involved something much harder to detect and much more dangerous: software that could beat the exam before a student even touched the keyboard. While Japan's scandal exposed the human side of cheating, networks of impersonators, fake IDs, and carefully staged room assignments, Singapore was confronting a different kind of threat: cheating without humans. In May 2024, during the rollout of the first fully digital AP Physics exam, officials at one of Singapore's top international schools noticed anomalies. 8 students, all Chinese nationals, were finishing sections far faster than expected. Their cursor movements were unusually smooth, their answers uncannily precise. But to the naked eye, everything looked normal. There were no whispers, no suspicious glances, no visible devices. And that was exactly the problem. The students were using watermark cheating software, a new breed of exam fraud tool designed not to be seen or heard, but simply to exist beneath the surface. The program overlays semi-transparent answers directly on the test screen, triggered by a discrete keyboard shortcut. When activated, the correct response would appear faintly atop the question, perfectly aligned, readable only by the user. And with one keystroke, it would vanish. The software didn't interfere with the test platform, didn't generate alerts, and ran quietly in the background, undetectable by basic proctoring systems. This wasn't just a clever hack, it was a product. Investigators later discovered that watermark software was being sold on black market chat groups for 20,000 to 30,000 RMB, complete with installation services, updates, and live customer support. Some vendors offered premium packages that included behavioral AI mimicry, making the user's clicking and scrolling patterns indistinguishable from that of an honest test taker. These features were essential. The College Board, like many modern exam boards, now employed AI-based surveillance tools that monitored more than just answers. It tracked how answers were reached. Sudden jumps between questions, robotic timing, or lack of hesitation could all be red flags. But for a while, the students had the upper hand, until the AI pushed back. The College Board's behavioral analysis flagged the 8 Singaporean students due to identical cursor paths, perfect answer timing, and lack of revision, a statistical impossibility for even the best test takers. When confronted, several students admitted they had been coached by agents in mainland China who sold the software as part of an AP exam guarantee package. These packages offered not only the cheat program, but also trial versions for practice, a dedicated support team, and step-by-step guides on how to evade detection. Some agents even provided remote-controlled laptops pre-installed with the software, couriered internationally using business fronts. The consequences were swift. The students' scores were canceled. They were permanently blacklisted by the College Board, making them ineligible for all future AP exams. In some cases, their university offers were withdrawn. But the fallout extended further. Singapore's Ministry of Education worked with the US Testing Authority to trace the origin of the software and its spread through the region. Dozens of schools issued internal warnings. Laptop checks became mandatory before digital exams. Some institutions began requiring paper-based alternatives or live in-person testing for at-risk students. Yet the more investigators dug, the more they realized that watermark software was only the tip of the iceberg. There were systems that allowed real-time screen mirroring, enabling a ghost user from another country to control the test. Others used Bluetooth-enabled contact lenses to flash small segments of answers. One AI tool allowed a user to read the question aloud, and within seconds, an answer would be whispered back through a nearly invisible earpiece connected via a concealed bone conduction device. And behind each of these tools was a growing industry, staffed not by hackers, but by former tutors, software developers, and education insiders, many of whom had once worked in legitimate Chinese edtech firms. What made these methods even more dangerous was how normalized they had become. In interviews with anonymous students, many said they didn't consider watermark cheating to be real cheating. One student explained, "We're still the ones clicking. It's not like someone else is doing it for us." Another claimed he only used it to save time on questions he already knew. To these students, cheating had been reframed as optimization, a necessary edge in a world where everyone else was supposedly doing it too. Singapore's scandal sent shockwaves across Southeast Asia, triggering increased scrutiny on all forms of digital testing. But it also raised deeper concerns. Was this the future of academic dishonesty? Invisible, adaptive, global? The tools would only become more refined. And traditional methods of detection, watching a student's eyes, verifying their ID, were increasingly irrelevant. In this new digital battlefield, proctors were no longer human. The cheaters had become the early adopters, and institutions were racing to catch up. And just as Singapore struggled to clamp down on this invisible war, another shockwave erupted across the globe, in the United Kingdom. But this time, there were no earpieces, no software overlays, no cameras, just paperwork, lots of it. And every page told the same lie. This student belongs here. In June 2024, while Asia was dealing with high-tech cheating and coordinated exam room operations, the United Kingdom found itself facing a very different kind of crisis, one rooted not in gadgets or software, but in paperwork. The University of Manchester, one of the UK's most prestigious institutions, quietly launched a document verification initiative targeting international students, prompted by suspicions that a growing number of applications from China may have been forged. What started as a small audit spiraled into a nationwide academic reckoning. By the end of the summer, more than 1,000 Chinese students were expelled for academic fraud. Their crimes? Falsified transcripts, fake degrees, altered recommendation letters, and even fabricated education histories from schools that didn't exist. The system that enabled this fraud was neither amateur nor accidental. At the heart of the scandal were so-called study abroad agencies in China, businesses that claimed to offer application assistance, but in reality ran a sophisticated black market. These agencies promised parents guaranteed entry to G5 universities like Oxford, Cambridge, and Imperial College. Their price list varied by school and degree level, ranging from 50,000 RMB for minor adjustments to to over 1.6 million RMB for full packages that included fake undergraduate transcripts, counterfeit English proficiency test results, and even bribery fees to so-called insiders. Many parents, under enormous societal pressure, handed over their savings without fully understanding what they were buying. These agencies created entire false academic identities, complete with custom email domains impersonating real institutions, forged signatures, and falsified communication threads between students and fake deans. In one case, a student submitted a recommendation letter from a professor who had died 4 years prior. Another claimed to have completed a degree at a college that had been shut down since 2016. The fraud wasn't sloppy, it was surgical, built by people who knew exactly what UK universities were looking for. The result? Hundreds of students entered the system under false pretenses. When the University of Manchester's audit uncovered patterns, multiple students with identical formatting in their recommendation letters or course codes that didn't match official syllabi, it triggered a wider investigation. Internal auditors collaborated with the UK Home Office and soon discovered that the problem was not isolated to one school. Cardiff Metropolitan University, for instance, expelled over 50 Chinese students after discovering that their English language proficiency test results had been obtained through proxy testing. The students had passed exams with near-perfect scores, but were unable to carry out basic conversations in English once they arrived in the UK. In Macau, a nearby education hub with close ties to British and Chinese systems, a separate scandal erupted. 24 Chinese students were caught using forged Hong Kong Diploma of Secondary Education (HKDSE) results to gain entry into the University of Macau. 4 were arrested, and the rest fled back to mainland China before disciplinary actions could be completed. The Macau police confirmed the existence of a criminal group that specialized in forging HKDSE results for clients from mainland China. The group included university students and former school staff, highlighting once again that the fraud ecosystem was populated by insiders who knew how to bypass the system's defenses. Back in the UK, the consequences were severe. Students who had been accepted under fraudulent credentials were given 14 days to leave the country. Appeals were few and rarely successful. The reputational damage to the universities was immense, with media outlets questioning how such widespread fraud could have gone undetected for so long. The universities responded by implementing third-party academic verification services, requesting direct authentication from issuing institutions, and even using AI tools to analyze document metadata for signs of tampering. But none of this changed the fact that trust had been broken. For the students who were expelled, the experience was devastating. Some claimed they had no idea the documents were fake, that their parents had handled everything through agencies. Others admitted to knowingly participating, but justified it by saying everyone else was doing it. In many cases, the line between victim and perpetrator was hopelessly blurred. Students who had borrowed money to come to the UK returned home in debt, disgraced, and with no academic credentials. Worse yet, their personal data, passports, transcripts, family information, had already been sold by the same agencies they trusted. Perhaps the most alarming aspect of the UK scandal is that none of it involved traditional cheating. No test tampering, no impersonation, no micro-devices. The fraud occurred entirely in the application process, long before students ever stepped foot in a classroom. And yet, the impact was just as destructive. Universities were forced to re-examine thousands of existing student files. Admissions officers were retrained, and visa officials began treating every Chinese applicant with suspicion. Students with real credentials suddenly found themselves under heightened scrutiny. Professors began requesting oral interviews or in-person assessments to validate written work. In the name of protecting academic integrity, the UK system had begun quietly eroding the assumption of innocence. And as the dust settled, one question remained. How did we get here? What kind of culture normalizes cheating to this extent? Not just among students, but among families, consultants, and even institutions. To answer that, we have to look not at the testing rooms or the university gates, but at the society these students came from. Because in China, the rot runs deeper than the exam room. It starts with what children are taught to admire, who they are told to emulate, and what they learn about success before they ever write a single word on an application. In most countries, academic fraud is treated as a personal failing, an individual's moral lapse. But in China, the roots run deeper. To understand the scale and normalization of cheating among Chinese international students, you have to look at the cultural machinery that shapes their values from childhood. And that machinery doesn't just tolerate dishonesty, it often rewards it. In a country where education is synonymous with status, and status often trumps merit, cheating becomes not an exception, but an expectation. And the evidence isn't hidden in test scores. It's front and center, worn like a badge of success by some of China's most famous names. Take Tong Ju, a rising actor whose fame skyrocketed after starring in historical dramas. In 2020, during a seemingly innocent live stream, he casually admitted that he had faked his high school records to gain admission into the Central Academy of Drama, one of China's top-performing arts institutions. He explained that he had repeated a year in high school, which technically disqualified him from applying, but with his family's help, he was able to pose as a first-time student and bypass the rules. The backlash was swift but short-lived. Internet sleuths uncovered that his father held a high-ranking political position, and his mother had once owned multiple properties, until they were seized in a corruption scandal. And yet, Tong Ju faced no legal consequences. He kept his roles, he kept his fans, and his story quietly faded into the background. Then there's Na Yan, an actress born and raised in Beijing, who entered the prestigious Shanghai Theater Academy through a targeted enrollment quota, a policy designed to give students from poor rural regions like Inner Mongolia a chance at higher education. Na wasn't from Inner Mongolia. She had simply registered her address there temporarily to qualify for the program, displacing someone who genuinely fit the criteria. After graduation, she failed to fulfill her service obligation at a regional theater as required by the quota. Instead, she went abroad for further study. Years later, she admitted to the deception during a press tour for her new drama. The revelation sparked outrage, but once again, no disciplinary action was taken. State-run media simply deleted her older videos and promotional content, and the story vanished as quickly as it appeared. These cases aren't flukes. They're symptoms of a deeper rot. In China, status and guanxi, personal connections, often matter more than skill. Children grow up watching celebrities, influencers, and even government officials cut corners without facing consequences. When cheating brings rewards and honesty brings only more competition, it's no wonder students begin to treat academic fraud as a rational career move. But it doesn't stop with celebrities. Even China's highest leadership hasn't escaped scrutiny. Xi Jinping, China's current president, is officially listed as holding a PhD in Marxist theory from Tsinghua University. But critics, including a former secretary to Chairman Mao, have long questioned the legitimacy of that degree. They point to inconsistencies in Xi's academic timeline, suggesting he never completed a standard undergraduate education. Online, he's mockingly referred to as the primary school PhD. And while such criticisms are quickly censored on Chinese platforms, they continue to circulate internationally, adding to a broader narrative. If the highest office in the land is suspected of resume fraud, who's really setting the example? The rot doesn't just stop at the top, it filters down through the education system itself. For years, Chinese parents have used study agencies to secure their children's entry into elite schools abroad. What begins as tutoring quickly escalates into document fabrication, ghostwriting, and bribery. These services are advertised openly on platforms like WeChat, often with guarantees: admit to the Ivy League or your money back. Some parents see this as an investment. Others justify it as a way to level the playing field. Either way, the result is the same. Children are taught that rules are obstacles, not boundaries. Even in daily school life, cheating is often tolerated, if not encouraged. Students copy homework, share answers in exams, and pay others to write papers. Teachers turn a blind eye, focusing instead on results. In this environment, success is not earned, it's engineered, and the pressure is enormous. Families pour their entire savings into education. The infamous Gaokao, China's national college entrance exam, has a failure rate so brutal that it spawned its own boot camp industry. In such a system, morality becomes a luxury few can afford. So when a student uses AI to pass an assignment or hires someone to take a TOEIC exam, they don't always feel guilt. They feel clever. They feel competitive. They're doing what they've been taught, win at any cost. And if they get caught, maybe they'll just be the unlucky one, not the unethical one. That distinction, blurred from the very beginning, is what turns a culture of achievement into a culture of deception. This is the environment that bred the scandals in Japan, Singapore, and the UK. And it's why no solution, no blacklist, no AI detector, no fingerprint scanner, will ever be enough until the underlying value system is confronted. But as international institutions scramble to protect their reputations, one question now haunts them. How do you rebuild trust with a generation raised to believe that trust is a weakness? The ripple effects of these scandals didn't stop with the cheaters. They engulfed an entire generation. From the moment news broke about mass expulsions, proxy test-taking, and software-enabled fraud, universities and governments around the world were forced to ask a painful question. Can we trust any of them? It didn't matter whether a student had studied honestly or not. A shadow of suspicion had been cast over every Chinese international applicant, and that suspicion was spreading like wildfire. In the weeks following the Manchester expulsion wave, several UK universities quietly implemented emergency screening protocols. Admissions departments paused application processing for students with Chinese credentials. Some required re-verification through third-party agencies. Others introduced oral interviews and demanded real-time writing samples to confirm English proficiency. Schools in Australia, Canada, and the US soon followed suit. Suddenly, being Chinese wasn't just a demographic category, it had become a risk factor, and for the honest students, the consequences were devastating. Many found themselves randomly pulled aside for questioning. Others lost scholarships after being lumped into broader investigations. Some who had worked years to build authentic academic records now faced visa rejections and delayed graduation. Recruiters, already skeptical of overseas qualifications, began to view degrees earned abroad by Chinese nationals as potentially compromised. On the policy level, standardized testing organizations like TOEIC, IELTS, and College Board began sharing cross-border watch lists. Exam security protocols were overhauled. AI surveillance and testing platforms was expanded, raising questions about privacy and profiling. Some institutions debated whether to cap Chinese admissions quotas altogether, not out of racism, but out of fear that the system had become unmanageable. But the result was the same. A chilling effect that impacted both the guilty and the innocent. Perhaps the most disturbing legacy of these scandals is the normalization of cynicism. In China, many students no longer see international education as a path to growth, but as a game with loopholes and shortcuts. In the West, universities have started to question whether meritocratic systems can survive under global pressure. The result is a world in which everyone is suspicious, everyone is defensive, and no one feels safe telling the truth. Because at the heart of these scandals isn't just dishonesty, it's a complete breakdown of trust. And trust, once broken, is harder to rebuild than any transcript, degree, or exam score.